Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Debating for America's Youth. Today, I'm interviewing an awesome guest. Today, I'm interviewing the national champion in extemporaneous speaking, Angela Wang, for the 2020 NSDA National Tournament. Welcome, Angela.
Thank you so much.
That's my pleasure. So my first question is, you're in extemporaneous speaking. How did you get started in speech and debate, and what made you choose extemporaneous as the event that you do?
Yeah, so I started back in 7th grade, I think, and it was literally just my mom signing me up for a debate camp on the whim. And to be honest, at the time, I honestly didn't really like debate. I thought it was pretty scary. I had stage fright and everything. But I took a speech class in school, and then my teacher was like, hey, you should give debate a go. So I started doing Extemp in 8th grade officially. I wasn't all that good at it, but I definitely started to like it more than the other events I was doing at least. I thought that there was just a lot more liberty in giving my own speech. Like, I didn't necessarily have to debate with someone else at the time. And I also just thought that this idea of being able to do something on the spot also just seemed pretty hard, but I guess something that I just was almost daringly wanted to do. And so it just turned out to be the event that I truly just ended up liking the most, and that's why I've pursued it since.
Definitely. And so when you're in extemp, obviously a large part of it is the speaking and giving the speech to the crowd. How do you get over speaking nerves that you might experience in speech and debate?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said, I used to have stage fright, so I totally understand the whole process of just freaking out when you see people. I think I would honestly just encourage anyone who has nerves to just first start with a small crowd of people that you trust so that it's not as scary. And I think just slowly working your way up to introduce maybe some more strangers or people that you aren't necessarily, like, you don't know completely, and just slowly working your way up to larger crowds. Really helps. And I think another thing that's really helped for me is that I've literally practiced speaking and giving speeches in like bigger spaces, so that, say, for example, if you have to go and give your speech in front of a lot of people on a stage, it's something that you have at least tried to acquaint yourself to before you try it.
Definitely. And what about like speaking, like, I guess, like, I know you talked about you're working your way up to bigger stages. What about on the national stage, especially last year, because you finaled last year?
Mm-hmm.
How is it standing up there, and how do you get over those nerves of being on that national stage, but even online, like performing your piece to thousands of people online?
Absolutely, yeah. So I honestly think that there isn't a total way to just take away the nerves before you walk up there. I know that at least when I was backstage last year and when I first walked onto the stage, I honestly was pretty scared when I first saw that entire audience and realized what was happening. But I honestly think that the best piece of advice I have for working over those nerves is just taking a deep breath and just remembering that you've worked your way there and that there's a reason that you're on that stage. And so making sure that before you begin, you're super confident in yourself and you know that everything's going to be fine. And then honestly, just letting go and trusting yourself. I think, like what you were saying, even when I was speaking at home this year for nationals, a lot of it was just about going on autopilot, which sounds kind of weird, but to be honest, if you were to ask me what happened when I gave those two speeches, I couldn't really tell you, because I think the way that I give speeches is just, I take a deep breath, know that I'll be okay, and I just start speaking and trust myself that I know what I'm doing.
Definitely. And in terms of like prep time, so you obviously for extemp get a set amount of prep time. How do you use your prep time? How do you break it up, like between, like, I guess, for practicing your speech and like getting your speech like organized and your research together?
Yeah, absolutely. So at least the optimal split is usually a 15-15 split. I think sometimes, just to ensure that my content is good and it's solid, I'll kind of be more lenient with that split and lean more towards a like 20 minutes I research and prepare and write everything down, and then 10 minutes near the end I practice speaking. But usually the most optimal prep time is where you have 15 to write it all out and then 15 to practice, so that it's a little bit more balanced.
Definitely, that makes sense. And before a tournament, when you first get like your general topics for some tournaments, how do you prep based on like the general topics, or do you mainly just prep like once you get your specific, like, I guess, your specific question you have to answer?
Yeah, so beforehand when they give topic areas, I'll definitely try to prep them out and make sure I'm comfortable with them. So for example, this year, at least beforehand, we didn't completely know the split between like which topic area was which round, but at least we did know the general topic areas for every round. So no matter how far you think you're gonna go, even if you don't think you're gonna get to that quarters round or that semis round, at least like for me, I tried to make sure that I read a lot of articles on every single topic area so that when you get a question on a topic area, you're not going in completely blind. But sometimes, obviously, you're not going to have fully prepared for every topic they throw at you. That's just the nature of Extemp. But certainly, I think making sure that you read up beforehand so that when you do get the topic, you are somewhat well-versed is usually how I go about it.
Definitely. And then in terms of standing out on nationals, obviously there's so many good competitors in Extemp and every event at nationals. How do you think you stand out to the judges compared to the pool of qualified competitors?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's such a good point because nationals is just such a pinnacle of talent. It's just everyone across the nation who qualified. And so honestly, my best piece of advice, and this literally sounds like a cheesy Tumblr quote, but I swear it's just I feel like the best way that you stand out is really embracing your personality and your own personal quirks and traits. And that's honestly something that I really wish I did before, like when I was younger, because I think a lot of young extempers go into the event thinking that they have to sound super composed, super formal, like almost professorial and very put together before the judge. And I think something that has really helped with my competitive success this year and just has helped with how I give my speeches confidently is just letting go and letting myself really express personality in the ways that I say things. So maybe if you want to throw in kind of a joke somewhere, like in a sentence, or if you want to say something in a quirkier tone, or if you just feel like if you want to, just include any of these types of little bits of personality is something that I really, really would recommend for young extempers.
Definitely. In terms of introduction for speeches, obviously some introductions can make a speech really, really like solid, and some introductions can make a speech weaker. Do you have speech or like introductions prepared out beforehand, or do you come up with them based on like the topic you're given?
So definitely the latter, just because I think there's no way to have one perfect intro fit for every speech. And I think there's a couple reasons. So obviously, one, you can have AGDs that you have prepped beforehand, but sometimes say if you have like one specific AGD you want to use and you try to just jam it into any question they give you, it certainly does come across as either too forced or just you might not deliver it that well. So I think just having a general idea of maybe what type of jokes you may want to try to use, but not completely sticking by, a set formula before you walk in. And that's obviously the nature of Extemp because it's just so fluid and it's just based on the round by round situations they give you. But also a second reason why it's really beneficial to not go in with the super strong structures because every time that you prep a background to an intro, you always have to make sure that it's super well personally crafted for every question that you get, because almost every word that you say in a background is done with a purpose, and it's done because of the specific words of the question, because of the burdens of the question. And so just in general, you have to make sure that you're doing that in round so that it actually flows and fits smoothly.
Definitely. So you talked about like not structuring out speeches too much when you're making your speech and writing it in the round in that 15 minutes you talked about, is there like a structure you try to follow? Like I know I've talked to other extempers and they do like the 3 points, like the beginning, then the 3 points, and then the end. Is there like a formula that you found works, or is in it like, I guess, depending on the round you're in, the formula you end up using?
Yeah, so I would say that there generally is a structure / formula, you could call it, that I would use when I prep. So it's definitely like when I first look at the question, I'll start on the background because I want to make sure that, like I said, honestly, I think a lot of people don't see the value of a background as much as it is needed. So I'll always look at that background and first think to myself, like, what are key terms I have to define, or what are like key statistics that I want to include? And I'll take maybe 2 minutes to prep out that background fully, like just writing out little tidbits of what I want to say. And then afterwards, I'll move on to the points, maybe like 28 minutes left. I'll go ahead and just start to brainstorm as many points as possible without researching. And I think that's like a very valuable tip is like, don't like first look at a question and think, oh my God, like I have to Google it. Like Google's going to solve my problems. But that's honestly not the best habit. Like it's always a good idea to try to first call upon your own previous knowledge and then go ahead and Google if you can't think of any points, because usually you will be able to come up with points from maybe a past speech or maybe just prior knowledge or an article you read. And the benefit of that is that you'll come up with points that are more unique, and you'll come up with points that are very logical that you can explain well. And then after I've prepped out the tags for each speech, each point, and I like broadly know what I want to go about, then I'll just go ahead and prep first through third point and just put all the sources, put in all the content I need. And yeah, and then the AJD and the transitions that I do are usually near the end. It's just when I have time after I've had all the content prepped out, I'll go ahead and just think, what jokes do I want to use? And then the latter half of that prep is obviously just the speaking portion.
Definitely. And obviously you've given a lot of great advice today. Is there any advice you wish you knew as a novice? Like, I know you talked about one piece of advice. Is there any other advice that like you wish you knew as a novice going into Extemp?
Yeah, absolutely. So honestly, something that took me way too long to understand and just tell myself was to be confident, which is something everyone's going to tell you, but honestly, it takes a lot more work than it sounds. So one thing that I did to work up my confidence literally is something that me and my coach would do, is that I would stand outside of her classroom and like practice the entire extemp walk of like walking into the room and introducing yourself. And I think in general, I just am less willing to, I guess I was just like more critical of myself, and so I never really was that confident. But if I was younger, I wish I would just tell myself like, hey, cut yourself some slack, because as much as it is like good to grind and really work hard, I think that confidence carries such a big part of Extemp. Sometimes I'll walk into a room and be like, wow, like I don't have this point memorized, or like, man, I don't know if this is like this content's good enough. But just making sure that you take that deep breath and you tell yourself, I got this, like I practiced, I'm prepared, and I'll be fine. Because so much of Extemp is something you can't control. And I think that for a lot of novices, the thought process is, oh my God, like I don't know if like the people in my room are too good, or I don't know if I like picked the right AGD. But I think that cycle of self-doubt and just thinking about all these different factors you can't control is just something that honestly doesn't help you, and it can do a lot to hurt your mentality. And so I guess in summary, my piece of advice definitely is to just be confident and master that mentality, because that will carry through in any round, in any speech, no matter how hard it is or no matter how poorly you think you're doing.
Definitely. And the final question for this interview is, what would your message be for the speech and debate community? Like, a bunch of people will watch this interview and take out a lot of good advice. Is there anything you would like to say to the people watching this interview, or just the people in the speech and debate community as a whole?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that one thing that I've learned through all of this is just that the value of speech and debate is definitely just the community. And I think it's really easy to get caught up in like, oh, wow, like that person did so well, like that's why I want to talk to him and stuff. But I think one thing that I would want the community to know is just that we should try to form relationships, not because people are successful, but because we want to genuinely get to know someone, because there's a lot of value in these genuine type of relationships. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that I've taken out of speech and debate. It isn't all the accolades or any of the trophies, but it's really just forming these genuine relationships with people that have wanted to get to know me despite success, like even before there were like trophies and all that stuff. But yeah, I just hope that us as a community, we always form our relationships and we always stick together, not because someone is just successful, because that's very temporary, but because we genuinely want to get to know each other.
Definitely. I completely agree. I've made a lot of great connections with people in the speech and debate community on my team, and that's not necessarily those who are like you said, the most successful. Mm-hmm. I think that those are like a basis for a good relationship, rather than just a fleeting one based on like temporary trophies like you were talking about. Absolutely. I completely agree with you. So I wanted to say thank you so much for coming on and doing this interview, and to thank you for everyone who's watching this interview right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.